What's going on, everybody? I'm not gonna lie to you. I actually just spent about 40 minutes just now wasting time on what was gonna be a much longer variation of this, especially just given the fact that I really went a long way to just say a whole lot of very little. I'm not gonna say that I said a whole lot of nothing, but just a whole lot of very little because, I got a real bad habit of that. I say that in a sense because I do want to also point out the fact that, it's not lost on me the fact that this is literally the first video that I've posted in at least a month or so. It feels like months, to be perfectly honest, but yeah, I don't even remember the last thing. If I were to take a guess, and this is without me actually looking at my channel at all. But if I were to guess what the last video I posted was of, it would probably be a Broncos talk video. And I would say, in all likelihood, it may have been around the time where the Broncos suffered their first loss at home against the Baltimore Ravens. And of course, I wasn't too happy about that at the time. I mean, in all honesty, and maybe I didn't talk about this, I'm really not sure, but I do know enough to say that I kind of anticipated that was going to happen because, for one thing, if people think that Lamar Jackson shouldn't be a contender for league MVP, you are out of your mind like nobody's business. And I'm just going to leave it at that. We'll probably go into more of that at another point in time. In fact, we will. Future videos, and yes, there will be future videos. I'm definitely going to put that out there. Especially given the fact that I've done that before. And yet, yeah. Anyway, I digress. Something else that I really feel the need to talk about at this point, and I'm actually walking around. For one thing, I do need to let all of you know, since the last time I posted any videos whatsoever, one little bit of good news. I am back in the workforce again. I got a job. I'm not going to go into any details about said job, but I'm working again. Actually, it's funny because originally when I posted the aforementioned ridiculously long version of what I'm recording right now, I was pointing out the fact that, much like I said, I'm not going to go into any details, but, it's actually quite interesting given the fact that, at least at that time, it was a 1:45. It's probably closer to 3 in the morning right now. And yet, I gotta work in the morning, or at least later this morning. Good times, I tell you. But I'm only recording and I'm about to post this because originally, when I even started doing any of this, and I'm gonna just get to where once again I'm, in one place and actually gonna decide on somewhere to stand or sit or whatever it is I choose to do here. But anyway, I did this largely because it was something that I've always wanted to do. And also, mind you, I'm pretty sure you notice hair is really just whatever right now. I mean, and that's something that I'm sure you'll see as a difference, because I'm very, very particular about how I go about that. But right now, I'm at a point where I don't even care one way or the other. Like, it's like that, simply put. And I think really when it boils down to it, it is just wild, because the biggest push of all that I got when I started doing this was from a therapist of mine, who actually is probably going to get wind of it, because, of course, as I always do with all my videos, I'm going to share it on Facebook, tweet it on Twitter, but I'm also going to text the link to it to everybody I'm closest to, you know, and needless to say, I really just am not even sure how I want to say it at this point. All I know is that it's just real funny, because, as y'all know, I'm really big into sports, and also pro wrestling, amongst so many other things. And I'm referencing those two things because of a couple of things that I want to point out. One of which I actually heard hours ago. Having watched Inside the NBA, of course, I've been a big fan of that show, much like a lot of other people have, I'm sure. Especially because, Ernie Johnson, Charles Barkley, Kenny Smith, Shaquille O'Neal, they're an awesome group, needless to say. I mean, of course, I probably don't even need to tell you that, especially if you know whom and what I'm speaking of. You already know. But I referenced that because of something that was said, technically last night, but whatever. Anyway, I want to reference that along with something else that took place, because, again, as I mentioned, I'm a pro wrestling fan, and at least part of what I want to highlight is in reference to something that happened in the pro wrestling world. And I don't remember whether it was a year ago. I don't even remember the details, and I most certainly don't even remember the name right now. And I only say that largely because of the fact that, I'll just go into the aspect of the Inside the NBA thing that I want to talk about, and for those of you who have paid attention, and of course, obviously, those of you that already know, I live in Arizona right now. I'm actually in Phoenix as I'm recording this, and of course, as we speak, there's an investigation going on regarding Phoenix Suns owner Robert Sarver, and things have really hit the fan, so to speak, and that's just me trying to avoid the words that I really want to use for that right now. But yeah, it's just gotten pretty wild. But what I want to reference is in regards to something Charles Barkley has said, and largely because of the fact that it really and truly applies to me. But when I say that, I want to clarify very quickly that when it applies to me, it honestly, there are differences in all of that, and I'll go into that as I move along here. But of course, I will also preface what I'm about to say by mentioning that everything that I'm highlighting is paraphrased. I usually never really do a whole lot of things word for word, but of course, the way he talked about it is, It doesn't matter what your profession is, what job you do, whether it's housekeeping or if you're just, you know, someone who's in a 9 to 5, basically. You really shouldn't have to tolerate certain things. Like, you got to be good to defend yourself, at some point. And the reason I bring that up is because, a lot of what I speak of doesn't even have to do with work. Now, mind you, as I mentioned before, in a matter of a few hours, I have to go in for what is actually my third day of work. Okay? It's my third day. I'm just starting with this new job this week. And, interestingly enough, where a lot of that concerns me has nothing to do with work. And hell, I'm trying to keep all of what I'm speaking of away from work. To the point of, I don't want them to know really any of what's going on, but I've been at a point where I feel like I've had to defend myself countless times, and over things that I really shouldn't have had to defend myself for, and really it shouldn't just come down to that, period. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. I shouldn't have to deal with that at all. And yet, hours ago, there was a great example of that. I'm not going to go into detail about that, of course, and pardon me for, playing things so tight to the vest, but yeah, there's an aspect of that I have to deal with, and it doesn't even pertain to work, and that's where I'm going to reference the whole thing about the pro wrestling stuff. There was a young woman who I believe barely even was 21 years old, from Japan, actually. And I'm not going to say the name because I'm not 100% on that right now for reasons. We won't get into that. I mean, I may or may not have reasons for that, but all that aside, though, sadly enough, again, she was only 21, I believe. And anyone who knows of what I'm speaking of, feel free to correct me on that. But she wound up taking her own life because she was a part of, I believe it was a reality TV show. And just all the things that were being thrown at her just on social media alone was enough to absolutely push her to that point, because well, simply put, I wouldn't even be referencing that if it didn't happen. Bottom line, that's just all there is to that. And I say that for a couple of reasons. One, we really have gotten to a point to where we still, even after all of whatever it is that you want to refer to it as, just everything that's been done, said, or otherwise to promote the value of mental health. As a whole, we don't respect that. And I say that, and I want to make this point as abundantly clear as I possibly can, because I'm about to admit to two things here. One, for those of you who know me well enough, especially because not only will I be posting this on YouTube, but I'll be sharing it on Facebook, Twitter, or whatever, and I'll actually be texting people the link to this video that are closest to me, because no reason for me not to. At least a majority of the people I'm closest to, you're gonna probably see this having received a text from me talking about all this. But I'm about to admit to two things, and I'm pretty confident many of you have already heard this from me before, but I was at a point where not that long ago, I want to say, and it's November 10th, 2021, As of this recording, I believe it was, we'll say within the last 4 or 5 years or so, I had actually come to this conclusion, and please don't ask me why I'm acting like saying this bothers me, because the irony in that actually is the fact that I've admitted this with as much conviction as humanly possible, but there was a point where I came to the realization that I truly despise humanity for everything that it is. And everything that I've referenced to this point is largely the embodiment of why. Especially when it comes to, like I said, we don't really respect or even treat the aspect of mental health anywhere close to what we should. I mean, we pretend we do, but are we really acknowledging it for the issue that it is? And to me, if you're wanting a clear answer to that question, the answer would have to be an emphatic no. It really would. And it's not even because of really the way I've been compelled to feel about anything, regardless of whether it's things that I've dealt with or anything like that. It's just when you look at how society has portrayed itself, for whatever reason, be it politics or your perspective on something like COVID or whatever it may be, look at how we're acting about these things right now. Let's think about that for a minute. That's if we even take the time to actually think about this, because I seriously doubt that we do. Because I tell you right now, I mean, I've said multiple times in the past that I refrain from watching the news because stupidity, let's just put it that way. And that plays into everything that I'm wanting to point out right now. But anyway, to keep from rambling on right now, I say that simply because of the fact that, again, those of you who have seen this have probably heard this from me before. I'm saying this because I would like to think and I hope that this wasn't something that, didn't just go in one ear and seep completely right out the other. Like, I just hope this was something that was at least thought about long enough to consider repercussions, if you will. Let's just put it that way. Or maybe even lack thereof. Who knows? Either way. Where else am I wanting to go with this? I'm sorry. I'm so into this right now. I kind of lose track of where I'm wanting to go. But yeah, that was going to be my second admission, actually. And that's why I brought up the female pro wrestler. Because there was a point when I was really, really young where, and mind you, I wasn't even thinking about it. I was, 15, 16 years old at the time. And it never really and truly occurred to me, just the repercussions of all this, because, I was young. That's really the only way I know to put that, is I was young. And I sure as hell ain't proud of it, because, who would be? But anyway, point being, as I mentioned, young lady wound up taking her own life because of, just the shit that was being said to and about her, again, on social media. And, the crazy thing about it is that I don't even remember how it happened or why it did. I just know that there was a point where I actually threatened, albeit in jest, to take my own life. And I was saying things that, I heard out of a movie. And I'm not going to say what movie that was, but I was just throwing that out there because, I don't know, maybe in some way I was that upset to where I would actually let that get out to the extent that I did. But either way, it should be abundantly obvious all the things that are wrong with that. And again, I'm not proud of that. By no means am I proud of that whatsoever. And I'm not even going to pretend that I am. But what I will say is, just for the fact that I felt like I was pushed to that point, just goes to show how remarkable it is, because by no means am I at all suicidal, or would I even think for a second about harming myself, nor do I really want to harm anyone else. Have I been tempted to do so, at least in terms of harming anyone else? Oh, you better believe I have been. I mean, I think just going into the humanity aspect, the aforementioned humanity aspect, I don't know anybody who hasn't felt that way at one point or another. But that's aside from the point. What I'm getting at with this is, I really feel like we've gotten to a point where we really just have lost sight of what it is that we call ourselves fighting for, and it gets publicized and commercialized to whatever degree it does, and yet it's proven to be absolutely meaningless in every sense of the word. Because, again, as I'm recording this, and hell, as you're seeing this, for all we know, 1, 2, 3, God knows how many other people are probably either thinking about harming themselves or someone else, or even worse than that. And yet, and still, we're going to go about our business the way that we normally do. And it feels like nobody's even going to give a shit. I mean, am I the only one who sees all the things that are wrong with this? Honestly, am I really the only one who sees the things that are wrong with this? Seriously. And again, I originally started doing things to post videos on this channel for the sake of, just it being about my hobbies and everything. And of course, it wound up being a nudge, if you will, that I got from a therapist who more than likely is going to wind up seeing this too, because he's going to be amongst those people that I text, and of course I plan on getting in contact with him at some point as well, probably a little later than sooner, but regardless, it's going to happen. But I guess if nothing else, I want him to know that his advice wasn't entirely in vain. I wouldn't be here right now doing this, would I? Just saying. But more than anything else, though, I guess I'm just wanting to get, at the very least, off my chest the fact that think the only other way I know to say it at this point, I'm just gonna finish it. Excuse me. But I think we're all familiar with Jerry Springer. The show, the antics, all the other bullshit that's involved with that, and hell, he would even admit to the bullshit aspect of it himself if you asked him. He at least comes off as an honest enough guy. But then again, I don't know him. That's just an assumption I'm making. One of very few I make anyway. Which is sad because even when I do make assumptions, they're not necessarily the correct ones. Anyway, I guess where I'm going with that is the fact that a significant part of his show is actually the closing of it, because if nothing else, I feel like the message he tried to get across has definitely done so very much in vain. Because at what point do we really and truly get to taking care of ourselves as well as each other? And I think the only thing I will add to that is a quote from one of my favorite animes, something else I'll talk about from time to time on this channel. And I gotta paraphrase this actually because I don't remember the exact words, but this actually goes out to everybody, especially when it comes to humanity as a whole. But at what point did we really forsake ourselves?